Yeah, it's
Anyway, I'm Johnny Lynch, that's Glennon, and we're here to examine how tropes bleed across movies, video games, and TV shows. Welcome to Dystropia.
Should we just get that scrolling banner across the bottom as we're just bullshitting our way through the intro?
One of our
the lower third is just like the old the ticket tape.
One of our weirder intros there. This episode, I wanted to talk about comic fantasy, the idea of kind of comedic, satirical fantasy things. Mainly because you were playing World of Warcraft, and I was watching that because you had the new expansion, and I watched the first season of Disenchantment. And just that as a genre to me is one that's really, really interesting and comes with its kind of a huge barrage of tropes. So looking at movies, my notable tropeable straight off the bat is one that I think I enjoy it when I see it, and then kind of reprimand myself afterwards, going, no, that was stupid. But the fantasy pop culture counterpart, which is literally just like, obviously you're in a fantasy realm and they just do a reference joke that is, here is what the real world version would look like in this fantasy world. I really like the knights bit in Shrek. I don't know which Shrek it is, but instead of cops they do knights.
There's the second one.
Is it the second one?
And I think it's the second one, and the joke itself was done in Disenchantment as well. Disenchantment. It's a great joke.
It is a great, but they do 6 jokes in 30 seconds where clearly they were just having fun with it, where they're like, knights, and it's the guy doing the voice, tonight on Knights, and then it's them capturing people, then it's Donkey as a white horse running, he's go, we got a white Bronco coming down the highway, and I was like, okay, O.J. Simpson joke. They capture him, throw Shrek down, and one of the guy takes out a pepper grinder and just starts doing it in his face. And you're like, yeah, right, the pepper spray. And then them take the catnip off Puss in Boots, and he just goes, that's not mine.
I mean, like there was it was definitely, I definitely felt it was better executed in Shrek, but it's been used in loads of stuff. I think the kind of the first time I came across it that I visually that I proper remember was with Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, the Guards and Night Watch and stuff like that.
Yep.
Where there's the specific, like, for anyone who doesn't know, in like the entirety of Discworld is a piss take, and about a piss take and a homage to fantasy in general, but also like not just like Tolkien-esque fantasy or Chaucer or anything like that. It's also references like folklore and tradition and all these things. So there's there's like 3 or 4 books at the start where it follows one specific character, or 2 specific characters I should say, and then it starts to split off, and it'll go, okay, here's a book about death, and it's the actual figure of death, and then here's a book about the Night Watch, and here's a book about the witches, and it rotates between this kind of ensemble cast that very rarely overlap. It's all just the setting, and there is a whole thing in that where there's the Night's Watchman and his watch house and all the shit that he get up to, and it's like, because it's a fantasy world, they play, and because it's a book and you've more time to play with it, they do it more like he's a the proper like hard-boiled detective. And everyone's
they're doing the noir style, but in ye oldie days.
Yeah, but no one ever like listens to him because they're like, no, just fucking throw a wizard at it or something to be fine. And it's like it's a real kind of it's like that, you see it in the odd fantasy as well, usually in comic fantasy, but not always, where like you've got a load of people going like, you've got ill humors, and you've got one guy going, I don't know, maybe it's these tiny organisms we can't see. People are like, it's preposterous, you're a madman. And it's like, okay, we all get it, modern medicine, but yeah, the Discworld one for guards, the Vimes and the Night Watch, they're that's kind of the most prevalent one I think of that I think has ever stuck with me.
They do an amazing one in one of the Terry Pratchett books where there's a band playing called We're Certainly Dwarves, which is obviously a piss take of they might be giants, or they just do the opposite of each. But of course they're dwarves, and it works perfectly in a fantasy world. Every time I hear that, like, I get a big smile on my face. It's like, We're Certainly Dwarves. Great name for a band. Equally as good as They Might Be Giants.
There's just little things like that, like, are great.
I'll go through a couple more examples because there's a few I really like. There's a really forgettable movie called Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, and it's basically Hansel and Gretel from the fairy tale. They escape the witch, and then when they're in their 20s they go around killing witches. So the movie is set in their 20s, and there's just these two little moments.
Jeremy Renner in that.
Yes, he is, actually.
Fucking him and anything with a bow in it. It's
Yeah.
just like, you know, they have special security to keep him off the set of Hunger Games. Actually, I found out recently that him and Jennifer Lawrence are distant relations.
Oh, really? Really?
So Hawkeye and Katniss Everdeen are distant relations.
Man.
So,
there's a crossover there. But there's two little bits in it that, honestly, if they kept going with the kind of comedy tempo, I think it would have been a much better movie, but it turns into an action movie. But there's a bit where he has to keep taking some magical thing and he has to inject it into his side. And like it's mentioned just once, and then you realize it's insulin because he was the one in Hansel and Gretel who got fed candy for a year. And now, as an adult, he has to take magical insulin. He's like freaking out. And the other thing is, they had the missing kids on the side of milk bottles. So, like the ye olde milk bottles, the milkman comes, put it, and then like this parchment stuck to the side with a bad drawing of a kid's face on it. Like, yeah, of course, the missing kids are on milk bottles. And I was like, that's it. Keep a couple more jokes like that. Go a little bit more silly with it.
Was this an in-universe sequel to Brothers Grimm?
No, that Brothers Grimm
That's a shame.
And like Abraham Lincoln. Vampire Hunter all came out in quick succession, and I think I don't know what the instigator to that was. Maybe it was Sense and Sensibility and Sea Serpents and Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Those those books came out a few years before.
Well,
them.
I think Brothers Grimm there was a gap between that and Abraham Lincoln and Hansel and Gretel.
Was there?
And I think it was more just somebody was like, but what if this was actually just this? You know, like this is them trying to tone down the shit that happened to them.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, oh, okay, that could be interesting. Like, and I like it. I think Matt Damon and Heath Ledger had really good like on-screen chemistry in it, and it was just kind of like, yeah, this is fine. It's a perfect 3 out of 5 movie. It's it's not amazing, but it's not terrible.
There's do you know what? There was a big long ass period of time where Disney had obviously taken all the old fairy tales and done animations of them, and then they were just trying out other shit in the public domain. I don't know if Brother Grimm was them, but they bought Lone Ranger, they tried John Carter, they tried what else was it?
John Carter of Mars, give him his full title.
John Carter of Mars. Because they thought people wouldn't know what it's about otherwise, and despite the fact that the
book
trailer
series is like over 100 years old.
Yeah, that is true. I really like John Carter of Mars. I really like that one. But then obviously
I can't judge. I like Bad Boys.
But then they found superheroes and were like, oh no, this is what we'll do forever. Superheroes in Star Wars. Give a fuck about old public domain shit that might be interesting.
Yeah. They found it easier to just buy Marvel.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, okay.
I remember on the same thing of the kind of the fantasy counterpart, I had a great conversation with you and our friend Justin Webb about how in the Warhammer universe, the orcs are all the football hooligans and the dark elves are all the drugged up yuppies. Yes. And as soon as you have it that everything in Warhammer is a piss take of the British class system and the kind of British regional kind of stereotypes and stuff, it makes so much sense. Like that's I would happily watch that Saturday morning cartoon now where the dwarves are all the Yorkshiremen and all that stuff. And
the whole idea is that like chaos was communism and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the corrupting influence of chaos and how it would mutate people was because the stuff was all originally written in a very much a Cold War atmosphere. So it was, the whole radiation and, there was loads of that. Like,
yeah,
it was ridiculous. And kind of, there's one of the very first comics to appear, one of the very first strips to appear in 2000 AD was a thing called Nemesis the Warlock. And it's him fighting against a dystopian government and the dystopian xenophobic government and all the rest. And I honestly at this point it's very hard to figure out whether that was a piss take of Warhammer 40,000 or Warhammer 40,000 was a piss take of that. They are both so extremely over the top that it's but both interesting. You know what I mean? Like it's this whole thing of like if you just go ham on your story and everything is ridiculous, but everybody like there's certain things that if you do it right and you're winking sideways to the reader, but nobody in the universe is aware of it, it can actually be quite interesting. Like
again
and immersive. Like Judge Dredd was very very big for that. Like
it was so good. It was Judge Dredd is one of the ones that when I started reading it, like I was a few minutes and I was like, oh my god, I can't believe how wrong my perception of this was. That like I thought it was straight kind of cock rock, fascist kind of like, this is what we want to do. And I was reading it going, oh no, this is brilliant. This is proper punk, like, you know, surrealist, subversive stuff. It's really good.
Yeah, and that's, you know, I think it's just, it's to a degree, it's a very British mentality in their sense of humor, and they all kind of, you know, 2000 AD and Warhammer and all that, like they all kind of spawned around the same time, and there was very much that kind of, and I'd say they were very heavily influenced by them being young companies during Thatcher era Britain.
Yeah, absolutely.
That whole like, you know, the punk sensibility and attitude.
Yeah, we're talking about Pratchett, and we're talking about Warhammer and all these guns. There's a lot of British in the kind of the stuff that we're looking at today.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, I've heard it accused of Americans, and I'm not saying I necessarily believe this, but that like they, you know, oh, they don't get sarcasm. I just think that they don't, and like sarcasm and their satire is very overt.
Yes,
but I think it's more as their satire is very like their satirical comedy is very much based in present news. It's not necessarily taking the piss out of long-term establishment stuff or history, or, you know. So it's like it's a whole different take on it.
I think you could go back and look at British subversive stuff from ages ago and read it again and be like, oh, this still stands up, because they are so willing to go to the absurd that it's nearly timeless because of that. Because you're like, listen, like Alice in Wonderland is a good example of this. Is a comic fantasy where the guy who wrote it, which is either C.S. Lewis or Lewis Carroll, I don't remember which. I'm going to go C.S. Lewis. Nah,
sure.
Why not?
Sure.
Don't know why I keep getting those two mixed up. Was a mathematician, and he hated all this new math, all these imaginary numbers, all this kind of new stuff that was coming in. And he basically was like, well, then it's a topsy-turvy world where anything can happen and pieces can jump off the chessboard, and, you know, maybe the queen has a pig as a son. And he wrote this.
Lewis Carroll wrote.
Thank you, Lewis Carroll.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis did Narnia. Order.
Yeah.
I had to check there. I was like,
sorry, I read them all growing up in quick succession, so they're all mashed together in my mind. But like, it was such a that is a timeless piss take of him just going completely to the absurd, going, then it's something like this, and you're like reading it back going, here, I don't know the context, but this is great.
Yeah, it is definitely, I think, I'm not saying that they have a monopoly on it, but there is a fine tradition in English literature and other mediums of taking the piss, out of being able to not necessarily look at politics or look at whatever, but just being able to look at stereotypes in society and take the smallest thing and extrapolate it into the extreme for comedy purposes. So what's your film? Let's get started. What's your film?
My film, just with the notable tropable of the pop culture counterpart, I'll go with Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail.
Right.
And like that, it just kind of pulls in some of these ones of like, there are some bits where they go into the whole thing of, you know, the king comes along and meets the peasants, and they're saying like, I'm your king, and he's like, I didn't vote for you. Like, that is 100% just pulling in, like, putting the words of the man on the street from Britain in the day. It's like, he's like, I was chosen. I was given Excalibur by the Lady of the Lake. You know, strange women lying in ponds distributing swords and no basis for a system of government. And just immediately going to the extreme and the absurd with it. That to me is the absolute kind of.
I think it's the Monty Python way. At least it was something I very much noticed in Eric Idle's parts, because it always felt like they might not have done like this, but it always felt like the core of each part was written by the person performing it.
Oh yeah. And
then so one person can go, I have this bit, and then the others go, well, I've got a reaction.
Yeah.
And it's the whole basis of improv. It's the yes and or no but, and it's, you know, but they would sit down and they'd hone it, and then others would give feedback. But the Eric Idle stuff always seemed to be, particularly with stuff like that, or Michael Palin did it as well, kind of, with every sperm is sacred, and therefore something completely different. But it's this whole thing of, imagine, okay, so we've got this very simple premise or a very thing you can explain in one sentence.
Mm.
Great. Now let's have someone else completely fail to see the humor in it, completely fail to suspend their disbelief, take a modern look at it, and then just go to town on it. Because it's the it's the whole the Lady in the Lake thing. Yes, 1,000 years ago people were like, ooh, mystical. But it's the modern day thing of, well, this is ridiculous. What makes you made better and all this? You know what I mean? And it's that whole upstart attitude. Like.
And in my mind, there's 3 layers of fantasy, which is the British mythology, Lady in the Lake. I mean, that's pure fantasy. Then there's a religious element to it, where they're questing for the Holy Grail. And in my mind, all that religion is just pure mythology as well. Like whether or not you're a religious person, like there might not be a physical Holy Grail. Like the thing that you actually go out and look for it is a whole thing. And then on top of that, the idea of the Monty Python humor, where it's just like the running around with coconuts, doing all that kind of stuff, is them trying to go even more absurd, but it fits in so neatly that you're looking at it going, here, none of this is any more absurd than anything else.
Yeah.
There's a great quote by John Cleese where he's saying that it wasn't for Holy Grail, it was for Life of Brian, but he's saying that when you start trying to explain with a straight face some of the Bible or some of the religious stories to people, like, it is nearly impossible to do without there being comedy. And he's saying, like, if you were Joseph, like, and you went down to the inn and had to just turn to your friends and go, Mary's pregnant, you're like, oh, congratulations. Well, of course it wasn't me, it was
it was the disembodied voice of God.
It was God, wasn't it? And they all just nod and go, all right.
And they kind of go, so God told you this? No, it was an angel.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's like,
okay.
But like, you can see some of the lads don't believe him. He's like, hey lads, it was God. And they're like, oh, okay, Joseph. He's like, I believe it was God. I was like, that's great, Joseph.
One guy goes to actually go, hang on, and someone else like stamps on his foot under the table.
Yeah.
He's like, and they're like, shut up. Let him believe what he wants to believe. Because like, it doesn't mention in the Bible that like Joseph had like a wonky eye and none of the women would look at him. Like, he's a shoddy carpenter. That's why they couldn't afford like a package deal trip to Nazareth.
I heard someone refer to him as Joseph, Joseph Christ. And I was like, I don't think Christ was his surname, but thank you. That's
okay, yeah.
What was your movie?
Well, in case you stole mine, I was going to mention The Addams Family. That was my backup.
Oh, really?
Because it's kind of a modern day fantasy, but it's very much steeped in horror lore and
very much so.
The old Hammer horrors and stuff like that, and particularly the visuals. The visuals are very much a nod to that, and I just thought it was a fantastic. But actually, both films are brilliant. Raul Julia doing a phenomenal job as Gomez Addams. The only film he was ever better in was Street Fighter.
When I killed your family, it was the worst day of your life. For me, it was just a Tuesday. He does
such a good line.
Dripping
you can say a lot of bad things about that film. There's some great lines in it.
Oh, it's such a good line.
But yeah, like that was just my quick one. It's like I just think it very much has the whole thing where it very kind of reminds me, and I didn't put it in for this because we were specifically focusing on fantasy, and I would treat The Addams Family as fantasy. Because it's not trying to shock, it's not trying to scare. It's very much like we have this fantastical setting and we're principally a comedy. But it kind of, the Addams Family films are almost like a PG version of Cabin in the Woods. They're steeped in so many references to films and old TV shows and books, and I just thought that was really good. The main one I wanted to mention,
just on the Addams Family, I think what a good fantasy setting like this does is it gives you a shorthand to get to the story and get to the comedy quicker. Because if I said to you, the way witches eat children, you'd say, of course, witch. Yeah, of course I know that.
Yeah. And I'm on board.
Same with the Addams Family. It's like, this kid's probably a wolf boy, and you're like, I'm completely on board with this. We'll probably see him worrying the furniture later and climbing up a tree. You're like, absolutely, I'm 100%
Red
on board.
Rocket.
I tried real quick. I tried watching some of the monkey films from Asia. They were filmed in like I think Hong Kong or China.
Yeah.
And because I don't know their fantasy, they'll say things like, the way all bandits can turn themselves into a giant fish, and I'll be like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Journey to the West, that was a great book. I recommend anyone to read it, or like one of the numerous adaptations. There's been amazing games and films and everything else, and the TV series Monkey. But yeah, the main film I want to talk about was The Princess Bride.
Ah, yes, fantastic.
Again, like this was what, a film made in 86, 87. The book was like early 70s. It was William Goldman, and that's the book he actually has at the start in the film.
Right,
he's like reading his son a story, or reading his grandson a story.
Is
like
it Mel Blanc at the start? It is.
Could be.
Yeah. But he's reading from the book, which then becomes the.
He literally has the William Goldman book in his hand, and he starts reading and he tells the story. Like, I loved the pacing of it, the humor in it. It never really. It comes very awfully close to actually turning to the camera and winking into the camera.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it dances along the edge so well.
But that exactly that, like the archetypes of this is a swashbuckling hero, and you're like, okay, that's I know exactly everything I need to know. And he goes, here's a villain, and now they're going to sit down and try to poison each other. And in any other context, you'd be like, that'd be weird. You're like, no, obviously, heroes face challenges, and honorable hero can't turn down a duel, and this is a duel of sorts, and all this stuff. Go on.
The fact that he's climbing up and he's like, okay, I'll wait for you. And then, like when he's climbing up the cliff, and then he gets there and he's like, no, catch your breath. I'd hate to take advantage. And it's like just this the sense of politeness all the way through it, which is obviously very much a piss take on the whole kind of like
chivalry and
and no, but even the Errol Flynn like Robin Hood films where everyone spoke with the most refined of accents.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, right. But it's and like when they're fighting and he's like, I'm afraid I've been misleading you, my friend. I'm actually left-handed. He's like, oh well, I'm also left-handed. And I was like, okay, so you've got these two consummate gentlemen swordsmen fighting each other, and you don't know which one you're rooting for as well, which I love about that scene. And that's just one of the more famous scenes of the film. But like it still manages to have like really good comedy, really good emotional storytelling to it. It's got a very simple plot when you think about it, and it's very easy to follow.
It is very, very good fantasy in that every character has singular motivation nearly, and that is very classic in fantasy. Like, you need to destroy the ring, you need to rescue your wife from hell. Like, there's every single old myth is basically a dude needs to do a thing, or like,
it's the hero's journey.
Yeah, absolutely. But the guy being like, I must avenge.
Monomyth, as it's
so
called.
Exactly. But even just, I must avenge my father's death, and going through it over and over again, you're like, yes, that, like, such ridiculous motivation. I'm so, like, that is a perfect fantasy character.
I would say that there is like that's the thing, as you're saying, it's a perfect fantasy in that of their motivations. But that's the thing, you could take the comedy out of that film and it would still be a decent fantasy film.
That is a good point, actually. Yeah, you could.
What I mean, it's not using it as a crutch. It's just another element to the story.
It would be the never-ending story if you just took out all the, like, it would need to punch up some of the special effects or something just for some visual flair, but it would be a fairly straight movie. You could do that. That would be alright.
And it's like and it does, like I said, it does have like emotional range in it and stuff like that. I remember seeing, and like I just thought it was like him being a fantastic actor, but Mandy Patinkin, the guy who plays Inigo Montoya, and I saw him giving an interview like 20 years later where he was explaining that whole bit where like, you killed my father, prepare to die, and but like when he does it with the real vehemence later on at the end of the film, like, and he's explaining, he's like, oh yeah, like I'd only lost my dad to cancer like 6 months beforehand, so like, I just treated that as I was sharing a cancer, and I'm like, way to darken that film for me a bit. But yeah, I just think that's a perfect example of comic fantasy. I think it's almost the example in film.
Do you know, I think in the early days of this podcast we would pick winners. I think I would give that to you, absolutely the winner, because it is a perfect example of fantasy, and it is such a good example of comedy in that they've created these characters who are now self-contained, have their motivations, and at various points they pair them off in different ways just to see how the two different things would, like, two different characters will bounce off each other, and there's more comedy from that and more character from that. And the bit where it's like, inconceivable, and he's like, you keep using that word, I don't think you know what it means.
Inconceivable. There was another film I was considering, but there's one very specific scene that would make it more horror than a comedy or a comic fantasy, is Willow. I think Willow's a great film. It was actually, like, I don't know, I liked that a lot growing up. I thought it was a great film.
I can't remember the scene. What's Val Kilmer?
It's the scene when they use the wand on the dog and it turns inside out into the giant 2-headed monster, but you see the dog turn inside out.
Oh
or
no!
It might not be a dog. It might be like it's like a weird creature, but he basically hits it with a wand.
Yeah.
And it mutates, and it is disturbing.
I really wonder.
That scene is like emotional trauma for an 8-year-old. Like,
I wonder if I watched that in my friend's house and their like mum fast forwarded through that bit or something, because I cannot. Either that or it's purely like repressed in there somewhere.
It's probably repressed. I'd say check it out, but wait till after the podcast so you can have your mental breakdown.
Yeah, I'll video myself watching it after this, and we can if it's any good, I'll put up the reaction.
You can snip it in. Yeah, you can snip it in. But yeah, like the again, I think like Willow made for a good fantasy film. It just happened to have good comedy in it. But I don't think that would necessarily hold up as an out and out comedy film, which the way Princess Bride does.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's just those are my main ones. Like, yeah, games. What's your game? What's your notable tropable for games?
Notable tropables. So the game I want to talk to you about mostly is World of Warcraft, because I was watching you play it, and I have never played a second of World of Warcraft. And you've been playing it since day one.
Since day minus 6 months, because I got into the early access.
Right. And you've played...
So yeah, I was playing it before it was launched.
Every single version of the game. You take a week off every time there's a new expansion, and you race to level cap in probably under 2 days. It's probably under a day each time.
Under a day. It's averaged out at about 14 to 15 hours every time I've done it. And I'll do it in a single sitting.
My notable tropable immediately. This is the stuff I knew about World of Warcraft before, like watching you play any of it. Is that there's a big thing of achievements and achievement mockery.
The achievements were only brought in. They weren't there at launch, but yes.
Right. Yeah. So I remember like reading lists of listicles on the internet of like the 10 weirdest achievements in World of Warcraft. And it was like die by standing in a fire, shoot the opposing king with a pop gun.
Yes.
And eat so much candy that you puke on All Hallows Eve. Like this is the kind of stuff. But they're just fucking with you. Like you as the player who's put so much time in. They're now setting you challenges that take even more of your precious time.
So the first one that you mentioned there is Stood in the Fire is the name of the achievement. And one of the expansions... So this is the weird thing about World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft has... it has its comedic moments. It has comedy permeated throughout the entire game. But it actually has an incredibly well-developed and well-written lore. That could be taken as complete seriousness. So like Duncan Jones did the Warcraft film. Yes. I liked it. He did deviate from the original storyline, but he said he was going to do that initially, and Blizzard were like, yeah, because we want something a bit different. We know you're going to have to customize it for a film aesthetic, and that's fine. But I liked it. But that was announced when the game came out. And the game launched November 2004 in America. I think it was March 2005 in Europe. They mentioned that game that they were going to do a film in, I think it was like 2005 or 2006.
Right.
And it took like 10 or 11 years for it to be made. But towards the end of it, like, and it was one of those things that actually a lot of fans were just kind of like, yeah, it'd be nice if it happens. Yeah. But we still have the game, so we're not, we're still in there and living it. So it's,
a 2 or 3 hour long movie would be lovely if it happens, but we've played 600 hours or over 1,000 hours of.
Yeah, like I've characters that have like a play time, like as in actively logged in and playing, time of like months.
Jesus,
so that's just the thing. Like, but towards the end of it, I was kind of like, the lore is awfully big. And particularly with the likes of Game of Thrones and stuff like that, I was kind of like, I have a feeling that they should just team up with Netflix and do their own thing, like just do their own series and tell it, because the storyline for like the films aren't World of Warcraft the film, they're Warcraft the film. There was 3 games and expansions before there was World of Warcraft.
That makes more sense.
And there was a massive amount of lore, and like the world of Azeroth, where the principal thing is set, has a massively steep lore. And one of the things is, like, back when the world was created, there was 5 dragons that were created, and they were empowered with different aspects of the planet. So you had Malagos, who's the god, he was the dragon of magic. They're not gods. They don't really have gods they have like pantheons, but the pantheons are like they're actual forces of things that show up. They might be just incredibly powerful beings. So you'd like,
so if
Malagos,
if there's a god, you're likely to meet him at some point.
Yeah, but I don't think they ever actually use the term god. Not that I can really think of. One of like certain races in the game might treat certain things as
Ah,
gods,
yeah, that makes sense.
but other things wouldn't. They'd just be like, well, no, that's just a big bad thing we have to kill. But yeah, so you had Neltharion, who personified the planet. Like, he was the physical health of the world. And then you had Malagos, who was magic. You had Anachronos, who was time. Sorry, Nosdormu was time.
You should let me guess that one.
Yeah, sorry. No, Anachronos is one of his lieutenants.
Right.
Then you had what's her called? There's Kelestraz, who's the life one, and they each have a different coloured dragonflight.
I was going to say,
and then there was Ysera, who was
when there's fantasy stuff, it's like light, time, darkness, nature, magic.
Yeah, but that's the thing. They didn't necessarily have like a dark one. There was Ysera, who was like dream. So her like Neltharion was the world, and then Ysera was a god, was a dragon aspect who lived in both the real world and a thing called the Emerald Dream. And the Emerald Dream was like the spiritual reflection of the world. So if something particularly bad happened somewhere, there was a battle or whatever, that world, like the world would change, and then over the years it would repair itself. Nature would regrow, bodies would disappear, and so on. But if you went to that same location in the Emerald Dream, that would be permanently scarred, because it's a scar on the psyche of the planet. And this is the whole idea. And the whole idea was Neltharion became corrupted and became known as Deathwing. He was corrupted by what are called the Old Gods, but they're actually just a race of like, they're basically like Cthulhu and stuff like that. And he became corrupted, and he was the boss for this expansion, Cataclysm, which was the third expansion. And he would periodically in the game, because he was like when he came about.
Is this all a build up to the Stand in the Fire achievement?
Yeah. This is literally this is how much depth they have in these things.
Oh my god! Okay.
Because it's a payoff for the people like me who know all the lore and who know all the story, and then it's just like, there's little small bits, and like a person just running like, that's funny, but then for people are like, that's pretty good. Like, he was telegraphed as being the main bad guy,
right,
for the entire expansion, and when he showed up, he'd been in hiding, and he appears, and he basically flies around and fucks up the world. Entire areas got, like, they went in and completely redid the maps for areas. They flooded areas that were like valleys, the like entire areas sunk into the ocean and stuff like that. And because he's the aspect of the planet, so as he becomes more corrupted, the world reacts, and he would periodically fly over areas and just breathe fire across, like in a big wide swath across the area, and if it hit you, it just instant killed you.
Right. And
there was a running joke for years of like, like the very first fight in the very first raid boss, like where you needed 40 people, was his daughter Nyxia, and she was a dragon, black dragon, and there was the whole thing of like, okay, basics that you need to know for the fight. Don't stand in front of her unless you're the tank. Don't stand directly behind her because her tail will knock you flying.
Yep.
Stand to the side. Don't aggro the whelps because there was these little legs that would spawn little dragon whelps. And don't stand in the fire. Right? And that was literally the only thing that you need to know to do that fight. So, and it was like super, don't stand in the fire. And what happened? You stood in the fire. So it was a little nod like that. Like, there's loads of these little things. But then you have ones like they still have their serious lore.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And then you also have these ridiculous bits that are tied into it. It's so weird when you actually stop and think about it. But as a player, and if you know it, you're just kind of like, yeah, that makes total sense. That there's like that they have these both running at the same time. Like, you go around and you go into this area, and it's like, this is like, somebody unburied something that they shouldn't have.
Yes,
and we're all fucked if we don't deal with this right now. But the guy you're talking to is wearing a pair of beige trousers, a white shirt, a brown leather jacket. He has a cowboy hat on him, and his name is Harrison Jones because he's an archaeologist. So it's this, like, it's two sides of it. You know what I mean? And you're just kind of like, okay.
Honestly, some of this stuff, like, one of the things they do is put cutesy names on big monsters sometimes. So there's Pinky the dinosaur, there's George the robot, or there's stuff like that. Honestly, some of that to me isn't even a piss take. That would happen in real life. Like, if there was if there was a giant mega freighter in real life, there's going to be one called Boaty McBoatface. So there's going to be something stupid because that happens in life. That to me is like, it just gives it the right kind of flavor. But the nearly impossible achievements, I assume they've stopped doing that in recent years, just so that people don't, forget to eat and die.
The ones for getting like forgetting like Realm First, whatever. They were taken out because of the, what would you call it? Like it basically got to the point where people were like, they were worried.
Yeah.
So there was a thing in the game, all right. When the game first launched, they had this mechanic that they had to put in after like the first 2 or 3 months that the game was out, because people were playing so much that they had to put in a debuff that kicked in after a while. If your play session went too long, you started to take a penalty to the amount of experience you would gain and how well you could fight.
Right.
Because they were just like, this is
you put on for 20 hours, man.
Yeah, it's so we need to have something in here that will just make you, like, okay, like let's chill for a bit. And then they changed it around. They redid it so it was sorry, I'm just looking for a specific thing here.
While you're looking for that, go on.
But yeah, sorry, there was a whole thing where it was they basically reworded it, and then there was like, oh, when you log out, you gain a bonus, and then when you log back in, as long as that bonus is active, you're multiplying your experience and all this type of thing. And people were like, oh, okay. Because what was happening beforehand is people were playing so much that they were forgetting to, like, famously there was a couple, I can't remember where in Asia, but there was a couple in Asia that were playing who basically forgot to feed their kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There was also reports of like, there was 2 guys who were sharing an account. So one of them would be on playing and the other one would be in work. And then that guy come home from work and the other guy would go to work. And they both, like, they were college students, and so they shared this one account because they were like, there's no point in both of us playing for when we're never going to play together.
Yeah.
But we can both play in the same house and on the same server. So if I get something you need, I can send it to you, and grant.
Yeah.
But it got so extreme that one of the guys needed something, so he logged into your guy's character and just sold off all his stuff and sent himself the gold.
Yeah.
And the guy got home and freaked out and attacked him with a weapon.
Yeah. Again, this is the kind of stuff I've heard about World of Warcraft before, without ever having played a second of it. I was like, yeah, this is the...
Yeah, but I mean, like people go like, oh my god, this is amazing, this is stupid, this is ridiculous. It's like, yeah, but that was like 3 instances or 4 instances out of a player base of 12 million.
Yeah, that's
like, you know what I mean? Like, you get 12 million people in the room, you will get some head cases. I'm sorry, there just will be some fucking lunatics in there.
As the avatar for video games in my life, that every like cousin or parent or anything comes up to me and goes, have you heard of Fortnite? And then, as if it's some new drug.
Yeah.
I'm like, do you know people kill each other at football matches every single year? Like, there's so much stuff out there. I was like, the worst thing that you'll do playing Fortnite is you'll learn an annoying dance. That's the worst that'll happen. It's fine, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Well, what's your specific game though? Like, have you a specific one that you would?
A specific one that I'll come back to World of Warcraft in a second, but a specific one is Zork, if you remember that. And there was the it was a little text adventure game, and you appear at the doorstep to a White House, and you type and say you enter the house and you go in. And then there was Zork 2. It was a text adventure. And then there was a few other spin-offs beyond Zork, and I worked on a game called Legends of Zork, and it was an online one. It was a Facebook game, and it was really, really weird because that very first trope that I had of like the in-game counterpart, in Beyond Zork, they set up this race of gods called the Implementers, and they were a stand-in for the devs, for the mods and the devs and everyone who made it. And there was the tomb of the unknown implementer, and as you walk in, a ghostly voice says, "It's not a bug, it's a feature." And it just meant that this kept going. And then because I got to work on an online version of it, I was quite young. I was probably just 20 when I was working on this. But it meant that we, as the mods, got referred to as the implementers and would be the gods. And because it was kind of like, it was early days and everything like that, you could just grant people gold and do stuff like this. There wasn't a huge amount of balancing going on, so you could kind of fuck with people a little bit, and you could grant boons and stuff like that. Not sure how much I was supposed to, but it was a really, really fun thing. And that kind of joke of using satire to pull people down, using satire to make kings look foolish, or make politicians or police or whatever it is in these fantasy settings look foolish. That idea where you take something that's so ignoble and so shit on usually the moderators, and lifting them up to god status and giving them such a sense of that, It was really, really funny to me, and it just meant that people who were playing the game would refer to us as the implementers, and would sometimes get really annoyed, but not break character. Like, fucking God's forsaken place, implementers forsaken place. Like, this is the worst. And like, you know, if we finally fix something, it's like, they've seen fit to grant us a boon.
Yeah, I kind of like that as well, though. And like, there was plans for stuff like that in WoW, actually, that they initially wanted it to be that the GMs were more in game and involved. But
it's a recipe for disaster. It absolutely
is. They never expected the game to sell more than 800,000 copies.
Right. Really?
Like, they just were straight up not prepared for it.
Yeah,
because they figured it was a niche thing, because it kind of was. MMOs were a niche thing up until that point, and their one kind of blew the doors off it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was, for the longest time, it was this whole thing of like, you know, like another comparable thing in gaming, and it does happen a lot in gaming, is like, the like Fortnite. So Fortnite kind of has been the one that's really taken over, mostly because it's free and it plays on mobile and stuff like that.
Yep.
But yes, there's like, you know, PUBG before was kind of the one that started to kind of herald the charge of like, battle royale games are going to be a big thing now.
Oh yeah.
But there was numerous battle royale mods in games knocking around beforehand. It can just take, you know, there has to be one that kind of goes, that just hits it at the right time.
Oh yeah.
So, and it takes off more than they ever expected it to. Because Fortnite was a game before Fortnite Battle Royale. It was a squad-based game where you like would build a base, but there'd be 4 of you, and you're against AI zombies and stuff.
I remember that.
Like, it was a completely different game.
Yeah.
And they just kind of went, shit, let's pivot. And
like, I've heard that Call of Duty are getting like a story zombie mode soon, and I'm just like, yeah, it's funny where you just suddenly realize what people are buying your game for, what people are like.
The story zombie mode just announced the last part. Cameron was the main writer.
Yeah, that's right.
And they have like David Tennant and all that doing voices in it and stuff. Like,
brilliant.
it's been really well received. Like, it is mad that, like, you know, but it just kind of shows that like how much all your research and everything else pays off, because like they're going, oh yes, and we believe this is what people are playing, and everyone else is over doing something else.
Yeah.
And within your game, and they're like, okay, maybe we should listen to these people. Like,
this is the thing of keep making jokes, but keep your finger on the pulse as well. If everyone laughs and you go, they really, really like that, we should keep going with that.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, like, it's there is an article I've mentioned before, or I think it was a video, it's done by a guy called Mark Rosewater, who's the lead designer for Magic the Gathering, and he has been pretty much as long as it's been around. He wasn't the guy who designed the game, but he's been lead card designer for the last 25 years. And he did a thing at GDC, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, and it was basically 20 lessons in 20 years. And he goes over like his 20-year history at Magic at that point, and kind of going, these are the lessons I've learned and how they can be applied to all games. And there was one very thing that he pointed out one, that there's this particular thing called Fibblethip,
right?
And it's a little homunculus that appears in a specific card called Totally Lost, and it's just this tiny little homunculus surrounded by oceans of people who are just walking by him on the street, and he looks completely out of it. And the community went fucking mad for this card. They loved that little character, so he started appearing everywhere in photoshops and stuff, and they leaned into it, and people loved it. And it was, you know, so they put him on more cards, or they'd reference him in flavor text and stuff like this. And there is definitely a thing of like, listen to your audience when it comes to stuff like that, even the little inconsequential things that don't seem to matter. If your audience latches onto it, it'll take off. Like, so. I just wanted to quickly mention though, like, so, and my game is WoW, you know, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, I was going to mention like Dungeon Keeper as well, just as a quick nod, because that was kind of more like the single player. I kind of, the one I remember being the main first game that I came across was that could be classed as comic fantasy. But with WoW, like I was saying, like, they do a lot of serious stuff as well in there, and I don't think the game gets enough credit for it. There is I think
my first game I think was probably Monkey Island. I don't know if that would count as fantasy, but the kind of the pirate setting.
Yeah, maybe. I suppose LeChuck is dead, so he's a zombie.
Yeah, it's sudden. But go on. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, no. I was just going to say that there's a ton of in-game memorials in WoW.
So
to real life people.
One of the to real life people. Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because it is a game with such a history to it. Like, it has. The game launched with a memorial in it. Really.
So the first one was for a character called Roush, and the guy's name was Anthony Stark, Tony Stark, Iron Man. No, it was Anthony Stark, and it's in an area called Hillsbrad Foothills, which is a kind of a shoreline, small medieval Europe village, couple of mountain ranges around it, a very kind of just wilderness, and it's an early area game. But in the very southeast corner of it, like blink and you miss it type of thing, and a lot of people wouldn't even have known it was there back in the early days of the game, because all the websites and the information and the videos and stuff that are out there now, they didn't exist when the game first came out. People had to. I remember finding an entire area because the pathway isn't properly marked on the map on purpose.
Of course,
it's an area called the Hinterlands. It's meant to be out of the way. And when I discovered it, people were like, "Where the fuck are you?" And I was like, "This is just this area that you can level in." And people were like, "Oh, okay, it's kind of weird." But yeah, this one was there's a guy called Anthony Stark. He died in 2005. So the game, I think it got launched in Europe with it, but it was put in post-launch for the US. But he was friends with Blizzard employees, and he played the game at launch.
Right.
And he passed away while scuba diving. He had something wrong with his heart. So they basically put a little statue in the corner. It's a grave marker. It has Anthony Stark, 1961 to 2005 on it. And his character, Roush, is standing kneeling in front of it. And there's a specific music that only plays when you're in that specific area of the game. Right? And you're thinking like, okay, well, he was a friend of some of the employees.
Yeah.
And, that makes sense. And they've also done it then for the likes of the likes of like they've done it for celebrities. So there is multiple Robin Williams ones in the game.
That's right, because he was a huge gamer. He was a huge WoW fan.
Yeah, him and his daughter Zelda.
Yeah,
were both like huge gamers, and like so his daughter's name's Zelda after the Zelda games. His son's name's Cody, and he never confirmed it, but he's kind of winked and nodded at the fact that his son's named after one of the characters from Final Flight.
Right.
So it's a Final Fight. So it's like he was a massive gamer. So he basically he has you have to go to a specific island in a specific area of the world, and there's a ramp, and on one side of the island there's a giant egg split in two with a lawn chair on one half and a control box and lantern in the other.
Right.
And it's basically Mork's ship.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Of course. Yeah.
And then there's loads of toys and stuff scattered around the place because of toys. And then near the ship there's a collection of items. Right. There's a lamp called the Ever Burning Lamp. And if you click on it,
which is
a djinn appears called Robin.
Right.
And he basically says that he has phenomenal cosmic powers, and then basically he bows to you and then shrinks down and walks back into the lamp and disappears. And then he even says the whole itty bitty living space. So it's phenomenal cosmic powers, itty bitty living space. And he does the whole thing and he disappears. And then there's other ones that they've said that people haven't actually found yet. There's a tribute to Chris Farley.
Right.
There's a specific character called Barney Farley. And he does I think he does one of the dances that Chris Farley did and stuff like that. And you're like, okay, this is fair. These are and Christopher Rush, we're speaking of magic. Christopher Rush was the guy who came up with the mana symbols for magic. He's the artist that did them. And he did Black Lotus. And Black Lotus was also an item in WoW. At vanilla launch, it was the most rare herb in the game. And there's an area in the game where there's a gnome, because he passed away at the age of 50 in 2 years ago from a heart attack. And there's a gnome called Topher Rushcog, and he's got 5 gems floating around his head that are the 5 colours from magic, and he's surrounded by a lot of Black Lotus plants. And it's just little things like this that they do that you're like, most people be like, I don't even know who that is.
Yeah, it's all really, really nice, kind of kind of touches. And again, it's a long running game. It's got it is big.
They've done it to they've done it to fans as well. They've done it for fans as well, not people people who would not be famous in any way, shape, or form. There's one guy called Michael Coiter. His character was just called Coiter, and he passed away age of 19, sudden heart failure. And there's now his character is in a specific. He died during 2004, so he was in the beta, but I think he was on a different realm to me. I don't remember him being on my realm because there was only 2 realms in beta. And he'd done some work for Blizzard,
right?
Like freelance type stuff. But his character, there's a specific shrine of the fallen warrior because his character was a warrior.
Right.
And you're like, okay, yeah, okay. So again, tangential release. There's an item in the game though, and this is the one that kind of like broke my heart when I read it. I actually remember it happening because I was working there when it happened. There was a guy who went in called Ezra Chatterton, and his character's name was E29, and he had brain cancer.
Right.
And he was 10 years old, and he visited them through the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and he helped design an item, the look of it and the stats,
right,
all the rest. And there's a specific weapon. Like every season they have the gladiator seasons, which is basically PvP, and they have the weapons, and there's like, you know, there's gladiators, and then like the gladiators blah of blah,
yeah,
and then like every season there's a prefix to gladiator, and his one was the merciless gladiator, and the merciless gladiator crossbow, because he was a hunter, he uses crossbows.
Right.
If you mouse over, the tooltip has written on it, designed to E29's specifications. And that's still in the game, and it can still be gotten, and there's loads of stuff like that. I mean, like they you know, like I said, and I know we've been rambling, and we might need to trim this bit out,
you're right,
but it's like, it's this whole thing of the game has a reputation of being, like you said, it's comedy. People know for the jokes. People also know for the big, like, you know, the community aspect of it, and the big kind of fights and stuff like that, and the world building and stuff. But they do they do give a lot back. But they don't have to.
I don't treat World of Warcraft as a game. I think of Azeroth as a country I've just never been to, and that some people have lived there for a good long time. It's got its own economy, it's got its own fucking dialect, it's got all this kind of stuff. And every so often I've meet people who have either visited or have lived there for quite a while. And to me it is just meeting these people. And sometimes I hear they kill their children over there, and it's like, that's just racism against that weird country of Azeroth that some people live in. And some people like are completely obsessed with it, like it's the greatest thing in the world, and it's like, you're just, you know, that's just propaganda for your own country. But to me it is a completely separate like place that I just haven't visited.
Yeah, it's become a weird entity, and there's a lot of stuff that's happened. There's a lot of stuff that happened in it incidentally that hadn't happened elsewhere.
Yeah,
like there was a specific thing as well that and you know, again, we're gone wildly off topic here, and we'll wrap it up now, but and get back on topic. But there was specifically a thing where there was a disease from one of the dungeons when I went in.
Yeah,
and you were meant to do it at max level, and it would pulse for damage and hit everybody nearby, and they would get infected with it.
Yeah.
Pulse for damage, and it would expire when the fight was over, or if you died. So if you wiped when trying to beat this boss, you got rid of it.
Yeah.
But people figured out that if they summoned the pet and the pet got the thing, and then they dismissed the pet, when they resummoned the pet, it would still have it. And somebody basically did this in one of the capital cities.
Amazing.
And while it would tick for 8 to 10% of a max level character's damage, it could pretty much one shot anyone who was level 1 to 50.
Yeah.
But it couldn't kill any of the guards. So the guards would get it, and then they could never get rid of it without a server restart.
That's so good.
And it would just pulse. That data and that information ended up being sold to the CDC.
That's amazing.
Because it's one of the only times that they've had perfect data on the progression and on like a simulated progression of a virus. That wasn't their own, you know, like we're putting in our own data and we want to see what happens. This was like, it was never designed with this in mind, but they were like, it actually spreads organically, and they wanted to see how it worked. Yeah.
This is where I'm saying it's its own country, because if I played Skyrim now and I'd never played it before, I can start from the beginning. The graphics will be better than the first time people had, and there wouldn't be the same bugs, but I'd play through it.
Yeah, don't know about the bugs.
Yeah, well, but the World of Warcraft it exists, the planet, and it exists in time as well. Like everything, my experience will never be the same as yours. They purposely change it throughout all the different expansions. They have weird unintended consequences like this. They change it. They have different people in it, and like I was looking at something online the other day, and it was just all of the apocalypses that have happened. I was like, the sky being torn open, giant planets showing up in the atmosphere, and in the most recent one, just a sword being jammed into the ground, into the planet, like this 8 kilometer.
That was all connected, by the way. That's all part of the ongoing storyline.
Is it?
That wasn't just random shit.
And I'm like,
that was storyline stuff that was set up like 25 years ago in like the first Warcraft game.
And I'm like, but which one of these was the apocalypse? And it's like, none of these yet. Like, what?
No.
This is
they were all just like, they were side effects of the apocalypse being averted.
But I love
I'm
that.
Not even joking.
I love that you can say to me, were you there when the sky was torn open? And I was like, no, I wasn't. But I was there the other day when the giant 8 kilometer sword landed. It's like, oh yeah, that was a fun day.
Yeah. I've literally gone in game and flown to the top of that sword, and when I'm at the top of it, I can't see the ground because my computer, even with everything set to ultra, will not render that far.
I've seen guys go to the top and then just free fall down to try and time it to see how big this sword is. And they're like, well, the hilt is a kilometer by itself.
Yeah, it's insane.
Oh man,
insane.
So good.
Anyway, but yes, World of Warcraft. It is massive. It's a massive pool of humor and mixed in the weirdest yet like most seamless way with like proper storytelling and like heartfelt tributes. And it's just this weird thing. And I think that like I can't think of a lot of things that would compare it to it. It's existed for 14 plus years now, online and in a constant evolving state. And yeah, it's weird. But I wouldn't have spent all this time in it if I didn't enjoy it. So
yeah, that's it. And it is the stories, it is the people, it is the content creators, it is everything coming together in this kind of perfect muddle. Cool. For TV shows,
what's your notable trouble?
Notable trouble. Because I want to talk about Disenchantment and talk about the kind of Matt Groening style stuff, my notable trouble for this one's going to be the freeze frame joke. And because I'm watching stuff on Netflix now, it makes it much easier to do that. So all through watching Disenchantment, which is, sorry, I should explain, is the new TV show from Matt Groening, the guys who made Futurama and originally made The Simpsons. It's very much in the same style as Futurama, I would say. It feels like a...
Yes, more Futurama than The Simpsons.
Yeah. Straight off the bat, it's not that good. Like, it's not as good as Futurama or The Simpsons. It is 7 out of 10 at best.
Ooh, I'd say it's better than any of the Simpsons stuff post season 9.
Oh yeah, sorry. This is Golden Age Simpsons stuff is untouchable.
That's a whole different TV series.
I have not been watching. Yeah, I'm not watching any post season 9 stuff in The Simpsons.
Yeah.
I will say that I liked it as much as I'm saying it's not particularly good. I easily watched the whole season. I get past episode 4 if you're watching it, and it starts turning into an arc from there. It suffers from every character being Bender. Like there's a hard drinking.
There was one character I found that was completely unnecessary.
Yeah, was it Elfo?
No, because Elfo actually has story relevance. It was Lucy.
Oh yeah, that has to be.
Like he shows up at the very start and is a bit kind of it's basically a demon, and it's he even describes himself as like, when you go to do something and a voice in your head says no, let's not do that.
Yeah.
And being the main character is like, yeah, and he's like, I'm the one who's there going, do it, and I'm like, okay, so but then like she herself is already a rebel, and is acting out in all ways, shapes, and forms.
So so
at least Elfo was like a compliment to her.
They're all foul, all hard drinking, foul mouthed characters. Like even Elfo starts drinking and like starts mouthing off in an elf way to his, like he is the Bender of his community. Yes. So it just suffers from that. Honestly, every single Matt Groening season, I don't think I like Futurama season 1 as much as I liked any of the upcoming seasons. I think it'll get much better by season 2, and then I'll be eating my words and saying it's fantastic. But it
does have the same thing, and I did point that out the other day. We were talking about it on Facebook and stuff. It seems to me, and this just seems to be a symptom of Netflix and HBO Go and stuff like that, that will cause people know that their entire series is going to be launched in one shot, and that there is evidence to show that people do binge watch these series, that they're doing they're spending the entire season setting something up.
Yes, actually, that's
because you don't have to worry about getting someone to come back the next week. They'll just go next episode. Because I'm hungover and I'm on the couch and let's go.
That's kind of what I talk about. Them just constantly setting up. Because in Futurama, in the very first episode, Nibbler's shadow is visible in one scene, in the scene where Fry falls into the cryogenic freezer pod. So they had that in mind. They had a bunch of this stuff ready to go, and some of them were just complete jokes. Like there's like freeze frames on buildings where instead of TGI Fridays, it's called DUI Fridays. That's very funny. Yeah. They have when they cut to Mexico, just on the sign it says at the bottom, "Welcome to Mexico, silver medal winner in the Mexico-American War," and that's very funny. And then they have loads and loads of shit in the background. Like they had characters that would pay off later. They had Lita's parents show up early. They have all the alien languages that like translate. Sometimes it's just a joke. Like there's a shop selling humane human traps, which is
wasn't one of them as well that one of the old languages was French.
Yes, the dead language.
Yeah,
crazy gibberish. So I was watching Disenchantment because we're post Gravity Falls, post Rick and Morty. Like this is people know that like there are obsessives watching these shows. I was looking out for stuff in the background and things like that. They had a few good ones. They had Kraken Barrel instead of Cracker Barrel, and just the big shop. The Spotted Liver for a name of a pub, and I'm like, that's good. That's a very British sounding name.
Yes. There was something that you say about the freeze frame thing. I did literally like blink and miss something. When I watched Disenchantment, it was on my second monitor, and I was playing World of Warcraft on the other one. And every time it cut to a new scene, I would turn and watch it to make sure, because they always had those gags at the very start.
Yeah.
And the one I missed was the name of the pub, the Flying Scepter.
Oh yes,
because
it's where the king throws
the
his
king
scepter.
likes to just pick a scepter and just fuck it out the window in anger, and there's like about 10 of them just embedded in tables and window frames and stuff. So the first time I actually I it's in the pub, cool, but I'd missed that joke, and then it's shown again later in the series. I was like, oh, okay, that explains why in that other episode he was sweeping up a load of scepters.
Yes.
I was like, what the fuck is this about? Like, so there is very much the freeze frame, like very much blink and you miss it.
They do, but some of the ones are just silly, and I like the one where it's like a dude just selling. He's got a little cart with fresh dog milk, and he's like handing out milk to people, and that looks very innocent until you've read the sign. And then there's like a couple of dogs in the cart, like looking happy, and you're like, yeah, okay, that's weird.
Yeah. Probably the like. It was one thing I found about the series, and because I've been aware of this whole thing where they just spend a season setting up.
Yeah,
I was kind of like, I don't mind. Like, and I was kind of like, I could see them building pace from minute one, and but I don't think I laughed out loud till episode 4 or 5.
Yeah,
which was like, that's not great for a Matt Groening thing. That's normally that's very rare. Like Futurama episode 1, you're laughing out loud at some stuff. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
This was kind of like, I don't know about this, but again, I think he was just because it was like. Because they knew we're going to release 10 episodes, it's 5 hours, and it's a single contained thing. Yeah, we'll have credits, but whatever.
I need it to be denser somehow. Like there's just something about it that like I was watching out for this stuff and it wasn't in there, and there was like exactly it took me too many episodes to start laughing, and it took too many episodes for me to start like feeling the characters a bit. I'll make a prediction. Based on watching it and looking out for things, there is a scruffy servant girl that turned with her hair over her face, and she's in about 4 or 5 different episodes, always just in the background or doing something or washing someone's feet or like just doing something. There is no way that they don't do a parent trap there and swap lives with the princess at some point, or they use her for something. That basically she's been in the background enough times for that to be really significant. They also do They do a Futurama reference where during a fast forward scene where they're magically looking at something that happened in a room in the past, there's like this ghostly figures appearing, disappearing. For one frame, a time machine from Futurama shows up and it's got Fry, Bender, and Professor Farnsworth in it. Now, it's a complete joke. There's no way that they're going to link these together because they're owned by different companies and stuff. But my prediction is this is all in Futurama and they're going to link these together.
And people are already trying to link them online.
I believe
other
it.
people are like, shut the fuck up. It's just accept it for what it is. Like, it's different, you know.
Yeah.
I thought I actually liked that they had John DiMaggio not playing the drunken fool.
That was nice.
As the king, and I was like, okay, that's cool. I thought Alpha was at least a foil for, if you're going to have a cynical. So like what being an Alpha is essentially Leela and Fry.
Yes, 100%.
But the main focus is now on
Leela, the
Leela character, and not the Fry character. So, but you still need that innocent, hopeful dimwit.
Yep.
To just come in and be like, but occasionally get like, oh, I'm gonna do this, god damn it, So, because that dynamic has worked. Obviously, it's something that Groening knows quite well. But it more felt that Lucy wasn't enough of a difference to anyone.
No,
you know what I mean, to actually make him relevant, even though he's like very much billed as the third main character in this, and it's like, yeah, but he's not really needed.
He is the element of Bender that when Bender sometimes uses his robot skills to get in or out of a situation, That's what Lucy does. He like twice in the season uses demonic skills to help everyone out. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. I really liked that they subverted the usual thing in fantasy, the very Tolkien-esque thing, that ugly creatures are bad and the pretty creatures are the good ones. And there's a bit where like they go and kill a bunch of what are basically orcs and then bring them back. And he brings back the head of the leader and he's like, those aren't orcs, they're Noroks! That's our allies! And he goes, oh, and he just puts the head in his stick. He goes, then let this be a warning to your other allies.
Yeah, it was
like they do that. They do that a few times where you think the ugly creatures are going to be bad, and you're like, no, they're just all equally races of fantasy creatures. Who gives a fuck who's good or bad?
Yeah, it did have some bits that were I liked, but it just do you know what? Actually, it suffered from the same thing that all the Netflix Marvel stuff suffers from. It's like 2 episodes too long.
Yeah, that's it.
You could have trimmed it down. You could have just condensed your jokes more, because condensing jokes works better than in any other format. You to condense the drama, it can kind of feel rushed. You condense jokes, it's just you're not giving the person time to let up.
Yeah,
and that can actually feel better.
Man,
watching it, where you're like, I'm laughing constantly. I'm experiencing humor constantly. This is better.
Going back through Futurama or Father Ted or something that has like a lot of jokes very quick, it means that on your second viewing, you're now catching stuff that you were laughing over in the first viewing. And that you're now catching again. It can be just really, really rewarding. It did feel it felt stretched a little bit thin, but honestly, I do think they're finding their feet. I think the next season will be like suddenly a fantastic one. On the freeze frame jokes one, I'm gonna do my favorite Simpsons one, because they like that. They do an establishing shot, and they'd be a sign for Winnipeg, and it would just say underneath, "We were born here. What's your excuse?" But they did one time where they cut to a farmhouse. And the name of the farmhouse was Sneed's Feed and Seed. And then underneath it said formerly Chuck's. And I remember just like seeing that and then it cutting away and in my head going, Chuck's suck and okay.
Yeah.
I was like, that's such a weird joke and you made me do the work. Yeah. It's so good.
I think that the building names and stuff like that, or the signs outside the church or the school for meetings, they're like some of the best jokes. Like some of the most consistent jokes. Like such and such as child psychiatrists, where imaginary friends go to die.
Oh yeah,
it's just like that's brilliant.
Or where he goes to get his ear pierced, and it's like, if it dangles, we'll punch a hole in it.
Yeah.
The church ones. There's something about Virgin Mary was one of them, and then I think the first one I noticed was no shoes, no shirt, no salvation.
Yes,
it's just really. They don't even have to be the best ones in the world, but like if you're doing an established shot, why not fuck a joke in there?
Yeah, and there was also briefly there was the billboard in one of the episodes of Millhouse, and it was like missing child, no reward. Which I love. I love any jokes involving Millhouse. Like
they did ones where they would cut to like the other side of the tracks, and they had like a porno theater, and they had the pornos playing where Crocodile Done Me, and For Your Thighs Only.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love how much they're just seeing what they can get away with. They didn't curse at any point, but they're like, there's some weird stuff in there.
I think one of them the film playing was See You Next Wednesday.
Was that right? They got one of those in. Fantastic.
Because See You Next Tuesday obviously is the acronym for cunt.
Yeah.
But it's also the name of the porno that's playing in American Werewolf in London when he goes into the theater.
Yep.
But the fact that it was See You Next Wednesday, and I was just like, brilliant. Yep. It's just such a little okay.
Cool. What was your TV show?
Happy.
Oh, fantastic! Yes. I watched that a while ago. I watched it in a fairly straight kind of binge of a few days, and then didn't know if I could recommend it to people.
Yeah, I know. There was one person that I knew for 100% I could recommend it to and would like it. And a former guest on this show, Kev.
Oh, Kev recommended it.
I emailed.
He was the person who told me about it. So, friend of the show. There you go. He heard it from me because I emailed him as soon as it came out. Happy stars, Christopher Maloney. This is our It Follows. Then you gave it to Kev. Kev gave it to me.
Pretty much, yeah. And now you got to have sex with her. It's going to come back in.
All right.
So the stars Christopher Maloney and Patton Oswalt.
Yeah.
And it's based on a comic book, a four-issue comic book, which is assembled into a graphic novel, written by Grant Morrison, who I can't think of a bad thing that man has written.
Yep.
I could do an entire episode just on Grant Morrison and how much and this bit like. No matter what you were looking for in comics, I could find you a Grant Morrison one that not only would fit that, would be like a superb example of it. But so it's about a ex-detective, formerly one of the best in the NYPD, who's a washed-up alcoholic hitman, and his daughter, who he doesn't know about, from his estranged girlfriend, gets kidnapped, and her imaginary friend, a purple flying unicorn called Happy the talking horse.
Yep.
Really tracks him down.
Proper cartoon like proportions and everything. On. Big like, snout, smile, sparkles,
and very very much Looney Tunes physics and everything else, and how it moves and shapes its body and everything, and randomly pulls like clothing and hats and props out of nowhere and shit. But yeah, so he can only be visible to someone who is genetically related to the person he is assigned to as an imaginary friend. So other kids can see them, but not necessarily. Like if they're an adult, you have to be like related to the kid who you're assigned to as an imaginary friend.
Yep.
And she gets abducted, so he goes for help and basically tracks down her dad, Christopher Maloney's character, who at that time is currently recovering in the back of a hospital from a heart attack, and he was already on numerous had a lot of alcohol and was probably on numerous drugs.
Yep.
And it becomes this demented kidnap rescue thing.
Yes.
And I mean demented.
It is the buddy cop of the darkest noir that you can come up with, and the lightest Looney Tunes. And as you mentioned, Looney Tune physics, I really, really, really liked in Happy how if you watch like the movie Sin City or something like that, or like if there's a really tough character, he'll take like all the kicking in the world. You can beat the fuck out of him and he's never going to go down. Like he'll always come back up. He'd be bloody, things coming out of his mouth. They kind of do that where Happy can take anything because he's a cartoon, but this noir character, it's nearly the fantasy of noir that like that you can beat this guy forever and he's never gonna stay down.
Yeah.
And they they play it to extremes. It's the best.
Yes, like there's very much like so it is intensely graphic in its violence. Like he is a hitman, so like he's dealing with mobsters and gangsters. And if a group of them come at him, it's not like, a quick shootout. It's like he will bludgeon one of them to death with a fire extinguisher. And cool, we'll show that. Because it's played off. It's similar to the Deadpool effect, I can call it, I suppose. But it's played off against Happy's reactions. Because Happy is normally around an 8-year-old girl. And he's just horrified by this stuff. But then he doesn't always quite understand what's happening either. Which is great. But if you like I mentioned in Deadpool, or remember, I think we mentioned on the podcast before, but somebody was talking about Deadpool to me before, and they were like, the flashback thing kind of got a bit annoying, and I was like, well, that was there to make the film palatable, because if not, that film starts off with a little bit of humor. Yep. Where you see him working at the Sisters of, I can't remember the name. Sister Mercy. Company. Charity. No, it's like the Little Sisters of Bernadette or something. Oh right. But he's working there. Then he gets, falls in love, and you're like, oh, great. Then you have this really dark period where he gets diagnosed with cancer, and then finds out he's going to die, and then volunteers for the program, and gets abducted, and gets tortured, and tortured, and tortured, and tortured, and tortured, and essentially set on fire, and then gets massively scarred, stalks his ex-girlfriend, and then the happy fun stuff happens as he decides to get revenge. So that, like, there has to be that playoff, which is why they have to have those heavy moments in between the comedy. Yep. And that's why that film has to be told in flashback. And we're happy it's a case of there is a character there that only the main grizzled noir hitman can see. And the audience can see it. But everyone else is like, what the fuck is he talking to himself? Is he proper gone off the edge? Like it's violent, but it's the violence is also kind of suitable for what's going on in it. Yeah. Like it doesn't feel like, okay, well, you're just going into ridiculous territory here, but it doesn't flinch away from it. In fact, it uses it as a setup for jokes with Happy. Yes, it gives you a couple of over the top, surreal, violent bits in the very first episode that kind of is there to gauge
if you're cool.
Yeah.
It's like, here's how we're opening. It's like, you're good with that? Okay, let's keep watching.
Yeah, and it's kind of you've got like the innocent, you've got the naive humor at the situations that you get from Happy.
Yeah.
You also have the purposely sarcastic humor that you get from, I think Ray is his name, Christopher Maloney's character. Like there's a whole fucking, there's a car chase and the car flips.
Yeah.
And all the rest, like it crashes off the thing and it flips, and it's like they get out of the car and Christopher Maloney's busted up, and he's like, you know, like in the previous few days he's been in hospital. He's had a heart attack, he's had one of his arms slashed open, he's been shot, like bulletproof vest, but he's still taking the impact damage and stuff. And he's like flipped a car and all this type of thing, and he climbs out, and Happy's like, oh my god, your driving's horrible. And he's like, oh, what you talking about? Look at all the traffic we missed. And he just walks off. and as he's walking, the whole thing's set at Christmas as well.
Yes.
As he's walking off, there's loads of people looking at him. He's like, happy Christmas, everyone. And he just wanders off. And it's actually, it's so incongruous in how it does it, but it's very well balanced.
That is another genius moment in it, is to set it at Christmas, because you have New York City in its squalor and all the lights and happiness of Christmas, and it's another way of going juxtapose, like the most whimsical and the most harrowing at the exact same time, to the point that he's wearing a Merry Christmas scarf, and it's like,
yeah, he always has like a scarf or a silly hat,
and
like
it's
something
filthy,
blatantly Christmassy. I think at one point he has the Christmas jumper on him,
but
it's always massively at odds with the fact that he's bandaged up and bleeding,
and it shows that honestly he's not an angry, hateful person. He's putting this stuff on. I was like, hey, you know what? Come on, life's too short. Fuck it. Let's have a bit of cracker. Yeah. I really was super interested in that, as to what point. Anytime there's a movie with an imaginary friend or anything like that, they always have to have the point where the person accepts the real. There has to be the little, no, I'm, it's in the hero's journey.
Happening.
It would be the denying the call, and then the crossing the threshold would be accepting it and going on the adventure and having this invisible mentor / buddy character. And I honestly was watching it, and there was various points where he was completely going along with things, and I was looking at him going, you still don't believe that's real. Like you.
Yeah, but it's like there is even the thing himself. He's like, have I just drank so much I've messed my own head up, like. So he's kind of wondering, like, is this brain damage from the heart attack? Is this the drink?
Yeah.
But I think the moment when he figures it out is when it's the poker game. Is when you really think there's a poker game in it, where he has Happy tell everyone's hands constantly, and he just rakes in the money. But it's like he's losing up until that point, and then he's like, hang on a minute, no one else. Okay, I need you to tell me what's in everyone's hand. And like it just, from that, like the whole thing changes, and that seems to be the point in the show where he just goes, okay, I'm on board.
Yeah. Like we've been hanging
There's
out
moments beforehand where he's like, okay, I believe you're real. Then he's kind of going back on it, and he's like, okay, and then he's going back. So.
No, it is a really, really good show. I'd recommend it. Hugely violent. I have one weird thing with it, which is with all Grant Morrison stuff, where at one point they use a sex party to show that somebody's really, really villainous, and it's like, ooh, like this is the kind of thing that villains get up to, and it cuts to a really dark sex party. That's fine. I don't mind using that. It's a very good shorthand. But I know Grant Morrison must have been to at least one nice sex party.
I'm just the sex party in that particular show as well is fucked. And it doesn't even show anything, but it's still fucked.
Did he?
Which I just think is a remarkable accomplishment.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's the same with. Hold on, let me look around. Who did Preacher? That's Garth Ennis.
That's Ennis.
Yeah. The two of them, every time they do sex parties, they're doing all this kind of stuff. And I was like, you guys know too much not to have been to a sex party. And you always make them so horrible and dire. Give me one nice, weird sex party that everyone walks away from going,
but see,
well, that was
again,
a laugh.
This is the whole thing. Like, Ennis is from up north, Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And Morrison's Scottish. And they're both, like, it's that British sense of humour.
Yeah.
British influence. I say British. It's the UK and Ireland. It's the British Isles sense of humour coming in. It's like, I don't know, like some of the best comic writers of the last few years, I would argue, have all come out of I'd say two of the five best have come out of Northern Ireland, in Mark Millar and Grant Morrison. Out of Scotland, I should say. Sorry, Scotland, not Northern Ireland. But yeah, the Happy is
It is.
I think like I'm not someone who's fond of Christmas. I'm not someone who really celebrates Christmas, but I think this will be something I'll watch every year just to.
Yeah, that is a good point. And at the very not to, no, I won't say that. That'll spoil something. But yes, it is something I will watch again. It is very, very good.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
I'm very happy with that choice. Cool.
So I think that's it. Apart from my ramblings in the middle.
That's all right.
But yeah, hey, actually, let's make this clear right now. And I want a disclaimer when we're posting this on Facebook. I wasn't the one who picked World of Warcraft. You were the one who picked World of Warcraft.
I 100% picked World of Warcraft. Staring into it as a cultural artifact was something that I've never. It genuinely feels like I've never heard of France or something like that. Like it is.
Yeah, but you knew asking me about it was going to set off that type of rant.
Oh yeah,
that's like bringing
absolutely.
a junkie into a room and going, "So tell us about cocaine." And they're like, "Okay, I'll tell you about cocaine."
I'm not gonna lie to you.
Amazing.
I had a bunch of bullet points, where I was like, "All right, if he goes too far, I can interrupt him with some of these more like kind of a little bit more lighter things." And then you're like, "Let's talk about all the shrines to dead people." I was like, "Can't interrupt this. That's fine."
Well, no, I mean it was more just like I said. It does like its most famous reputation is for being fun, for having the comedy. Like the comedy thing is kind of well known at this point of how well they do references.
Yep.
But the fact that they've also put this other stuff in, is something that I think is like deserves to be recognized because they're always out of the way. They're never obtrusive. They're never like I'm sure there's some in the new expansion. I just haven't found them yet.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So.
Cool. As we said a couple episodes ago, if you like this podcast, please tell a friend. It is the easiest way for us to kind of get out there, get a few more listeners, and kind of grow the brand. I'm mad into that these days.
Madness. But no, it's the whole thing of like, the more people that are out there, it's like anything. The more people that are listening, in any conversation, in any type of entertainment, only a very small percentage will give feedback, and that's totally fine. We get that. People just like to absorb it and then move on. They don't want to be like, "Oh, do an episode on this. Oh, have you thought about doing this? Have you talked about this? You're doing this wrong, or have you thought about changing this up?" The more people we have, the more feedback we get. Like it's it's incentives for us because there is times where we're kind of sitting there going, "What are we going to talk about next?" And then we have to scratch our heads for a few minutes. Whereas, particularly in the early days, when we had a backlog that we want to get through this, and we noticed a hell of a lot more out there. But it's just a matter of like, what would you guys like to see us do?
Yep.
And the more people that there are listening, the more feedback we get on that, and we can refine. So.
And if you have feedback, hit us up on Facebook, Twitter. Watch Glennon on.
Or just open a window and shout out.
Yeah, we'll find you. I'm always watching. Follow Glennon on Twitch. We were talking about World of Warcraft there. He's playing a lot of it this week. He'll be playing new stuff pretty much every evening of the work week. It's Braxfin, BRXIFEN. I am now on Instagram after resisting it for years and years, so I'm Pyramid Header if you want to have a look at that. Cool. I think that's it.
Any of our regular listeners who follow us on Twitter would have seen me post the photos of Jonny at Dublin Comic Con dressed as Pyramid.
Yes.
So, yeah. I also love the fact that that we're on Twitter. I would like to see more people follow us on Twitter because Jonny doesn't have any access to that. He does have the username and password, but he doesn't log into Twitter. He doesn't use Twitter, so I can say whatever I want about him, and he can't really refute it or even check it. So
you could say absolutely anything under the sun, and I still wouldn't refute it. I would probably pretend
that's
I would just go with it no matter what.
You're like, yeah, sure, yes, and.
All right, guys.
Take it easy, guys. Thanks a million for tuning in.
Have fun.